Welcome back. Michael Lewis has spent a career chronicling people who find creative ways to identify and solve problems. In his latest book, The Fifth Risk, Lewis essentially describes what happened when, in his view, the Trump administration dumbed down government too much to function properly. So is the Trump administration prepared to take all of this on during this current crisis? Michael Lewis joins me now, social distancing from Berkeley, California. Mr. Lewis, welcome to Meet the Press. Long time, first time as far as I'm concerned, so I'm glad to have you on.
Good to see you, Chuck.
Let me just start with the premise of your book, which you were looking at the transition. And I want to connect some dots here. I'm going to put up a screen grab here of all the people that have been in charge of the Department of Homeland Security in the Trump administration. 5 different people, 2 have been Senate confirmed, 3 actings, including the situation here. It feels as if, I know DHS wasn't a part of your book, but that amount, is that the definition of the fifth risk here sometimes, personnel?
You know, the book, the starting point for the book is if you really have to think about the federal government as this, as a manager of a portfolio of risks, right? And many of them are catastrophic, and you don't know what you're going to have to deal with, but you know there are people in there who are dealing with it. And what caught my eye, and the reason I wrote the book, was that we had this process to hand over the government. And it was actually, by law, the Obama administration was required to spend a great deal of time preparing to hand the government over to whoever succeeded it. And Obama took it really seriously because he realized, because Bush had handed the government over so well to him, he thought. And Trump, right, on his side, had built this enterprise of 500 people to roll into the Department of Homeland Security or the Department of Agriculture or wherever. Right. And he fired it the day after the election. So the transition never happened. So there was like this, that's the beginning of this whole story. It's the beginning of our response to the pandemic. It's that the knowledge of how you dealt with, I don't know, say an Ebola outbreak was never actually transferred to the Trump administration. And I think that if you're going to tell, when people look back and tell the story of this crisis, they'll start there.
There's no doubt they will. Look, I want to pivot a little bit. You just did a podcast and you noted we're going to learn a lot about our society during this pandemic that is probably going to surface problems we didn't know we needed to solve. What are a few that you're seeing now that you think we need to be keeping an eye on?
Are you talking about like risks we should be terrified of? You know,
yes.
Well, look, this in some ways was not the fifth risk in my mind. Was the risk in that you didn't have top of mind. And I came to the idea because I walked into the Department of Energy and got the briefing from the chief risk officer that the Trump administration had not bothered to get, and I asked, like, what are the top 5 things you're worried about just in the Department of Energy? And he said, look, there are a lot of really smart people dealing with things like, 1, preventing a nuclear weapon from going off when it shouldn't go off. 2, preventing the electric grid from going down or coming under attack. 3, North Korea getting a weapon that they can actually deliver to the West Coast. I mean, it was like one thing after another, and there were steps being taken to prevent these bad things from happening. Now the question is, across an administration that's being run by a person who is largely indifferent to it, to what extent is this portfolio of risks, like more likely to happen? And the thing that worried me, and the thing that got me interested in writing the book in the first place, was like, if something actually happens, I don't know what it is, what's going to happen. But when it happens, they're not going to be prepared to deal with it. And now we know what happened. So we're now in the land of second best solutions because we had someone who neglected the instrument, the tool for dealing with a crisis.
Look, we're gonna end up having something will change in our society based on this. One of the things that I've wondered about is we're learning who's essential. We're finding out the truck driver is a lot more essential than some of us. The person who stocks the shelves is a lot more essential. Do you see a reckoning on the economic front that sort of rights those wrongs in time?
You know, the first thing that might come out of this is an appreciation of the federal government, of what it does. Its basic job is to keep us safe. And if we don't pay attention to how it's run, we will find ourselves in this situation all over again. So, so I think that's the big thing.
Yep.
I think that's the thing that comes out of it.
All right. Michael Lutz, I got to leave it there. I always wish I had more time with you, and I will find a way to get more time with you down the road. Thank you, and thank you to all of you who have been watching today. Hello from Washington, I'm Chuck Todd, and thanks for checking out the Meet the Press channel on YouTube. Click on the button down here to subscribe, and click over here to watch the latest interviews, highlights, and other digital exclusives.